Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Dolan, and I am your host for Time Tested Mastery Life Lessons Cell. And today I'm conducting an interview with two very, very special people. Today I want to introduce Rachael Meadors and Andy Meadors, friends of mine from the Big Bear Lake area that are going to be sharing their story as it relates to resilience, problem solving, overcoming difficulty, and applying faith-based spiritual principles to that recovery. For those that are believers, we all know that time-tested mastery includes a lot of those kinds of thoughts. For those that are not believers, I'm going to just share with you that some of these things that we're going to be talking about might be helpful for you going forward in the future. For those of you that don't know Rachael, Rachael is a rock star of a real estate agent in Big Bear Lake, California. We're not going to be spending a tremendous amount of time today talking about her real estate career, but a lot of the journey that we're going to be talking about is going to be interwoven with some of that intensity that you will see in her business. Andy, I first met in CrossFit about 10 years ago, and we were doing CrossFit together, and he is a beast in the gym, and he's also a graphic designer and website designer, as well as an author today with Rachael. So I want to thank both of you for joining us today and welcome you to the program. Tell the audience a little bit about your early lives and some of your experience that brings you forward to, the purpose of today's podcast, which is about the creation of your book and your transformation.
Ladies first. I was born and raised in Kentucky, a real great family. I was a middle child, older brother, younger sister. We would go to church when we were younger, but it was more like out of just something to do on a Sunday. And then the big hurrah would be whoever, you'd just go out to dinner or lunch afterwards. So church was about having lunch for us. There was no real spiritual connection or anything like that. And it was a Baptist church as well. And then eventually graduated from high school, college, and I was introduced to somebody that brought me out to Big Bear. Gave me a job doing vacation rentals and also owned a real estate company at the time. So I went into real estate at that time, got married, had 3 small children, and then life fell apart. And we'll get there in a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So how long have you been in Big Bear? Just so people know.
Big Bear, I was about 16 years.
Okay. What's your story, Andy?
What is my story? All right. So I was born and raised in a small farming town called Dinuba near Fresno. Raised really well. Conservative small town, raised in a church, had loving parents, and I truly adhered to the principles of our faith as Christians, and my childhood was really well. Of course, not perfect. There's no perfection on earth, but my childhood was great, and so that helped propel me into starting a great adult life. And as I practiced this obedience, I'm going to hit on obedience, and obedience is not really a fun word. I mean, I know it hasn't in my life, and which could be a reason for things to happen the way they did. So what I'm just going to say now is that I obeyed the commands of God as far as loving people, loving God, loving myself, and being respectful and nice and treating people with God's love. And from there, I went to college, same type of deal. I went to a Christian high school, went to Christian college, helped keep me on this path of this obedience and this peace of mine, this direction that I'm going, this great trajectory in life. Get married and career, having fun in life, and I had 2 kids a while ago. My son now is 20, my daughter is 16, and so I think that's where we'll end that right there.
Yeah.
And we'll get on to the next.
We talk a lot in real estate, about what's the perfect day. What was a perfect day? And so, I want you to think back before, what was your day like? What was your life like before the storm hit? I mean, what was the normal routine? How did you feel? What were you doing? What were you focused on?
That's a great question. I would say for myself, it was all about success. I'm a to-do list person, so the more that I can knock things off of a list, if you look at my to-do list every day, it's probably got 40 things on it. So if I can wake up and knock out 10 of them right away, I'm very happy. It would be a good mix of work, kids, home, vacation. A lot of, I love to travel. So anything that looked like my day would be predictable but successful would have been my perfect day.
Very good, very good. So very goal-oriented and task-oriented and very busy, it sounds like.
Correct, yes. I did the Strength Finders test, and my top strength was, it's not perform, I forget what the word is. Achiever. And so achievers, they feel very, let down if their to-do list at the end of the day is not checked off.
That's true.
Like you feel like a loser.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, I know, but that's just my personality telling me that.
Yeah, and she has 100 things on her list each day, so.
Right, yeah.
And sometimes I'll even write ones that I know I already did, just so I can cross them off.
Just so you can cross it off. The satisfaction of it.
Yes, yeah.
As I've gotten older, now I have the same list on the desk upstairs and the desk downstairs, so I can mark it off on both lists. If I go upstairs, I mark it off and downstairs. So I get that. But, so Andy, what was driving you? I mean, what was the prime mover, the prime motivator that was sort of driving your energy before everything, came to a halt?
I think it was a general sense of purpose, of fulfilling my purpose in life, which is being a great dad and a great husband, and knowing and feeling and knowing and being inside of this harmoniousness of life, of people, with my family and friends and with God spiritually, and just having my soul just being full of joy and peace. That to me is the perfect existence. And that's, when I lost it, despair came in so easily. And you can probably already tell that I kind of go a little deeper under the surface level of things. And that's where I exist a lot of times. And it could be to my own demise or a very good thing inside God's will. And ultimately just having a connection, because we know that connection results in love, and there's no greater thing on this planet than love. And that's what we're ultimately trying to chase or obtain and keep and hold. And we'll do anything for this love. And sometimes we go about it wrong. Sometimes we don't even know we do. And sometimes we know we do, but we're so desperate for something.
So it sounds like for you, connection seems to be sort of that theme, and that peace and the wholeness that comes with connection. And I find that interesting because, you mentioned that you came from a, very strong and loving family. So you had that connection growing up. I did not have that experience as a child growing up. I mean, when I wanted to have fun, I got the heck out of the house was sort of the kind of thing that I did growing up. And some people have that experience and some people don't. I think, what stands out for me is that, regardless of where we've come from or what our family life was, whatever, we have the same human needs and the same human experiences, and it just is a different story with the same purpose kind of thing is where I'm going with that. I too, like you, really do not like superficial conversations. I like to go deep, and a lot of people get uncomfortable with that. Was there anything happening internally to you that was uncomfortable with the path that you were on? Was there anything that the world was offering that just wasn't seeming to hit the bar or meet the mark?
Yes. So probably around COVID, life started to take a turn for everybody, I think. It wasn't just me. But my marriage just was starting to get, in a way, rocky. The communication was just falling apart. Anything that I was bringing up would just fall on deaf ears, like, I don't want to talk about it kind of thing. And for me, I needed to talk about things in order to process them and work through them. And we just ultimately were growing into two different people. Life started to fall apart, marriage started to fall apart. I'm at the gym, things are great. I meet Andy, and I guess that's in a way what the world offered me, right? And we formed this connection, this bond, because both of us were going through a really terrible time at that time. Big struggles and everything, and we're both in it trying to make things work. And I was being threatened with divorce every time I would bring up something to talk about. I was being threatened with divorce, and so that went on for probably about 2 years before I started to feel like, all right, I'll take it. So that's kind of, and this is again before I even stepped foot into church as an adult too. So life was about to change big time.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. A lot of people experience, not all people go through a divorce. Some people do, some people don't. Some find, parallel paths, to stay together with. But it sounds like you were looking for a connection that you found, and the result of that is going to be a lot of the things that we talk about in the rest of the interview. Another topic, and this one is for Andy, as I know a little bit about Andy's story. We know each other from 12-step recovery groups. We have some shared experience in that area. And so the question I have for you is, how did that distort your identity? How did the realization that you had that issue going on in your life, how did that transform you?
All right, here we go. My gosh. So like I said earlier, I was in pretty darn good obedience. And alcohol was not a thing in my family. I'm not predisposed in a traditional sense, as we know, through generations. And so it wasn't a big thing in my life until it was. So I didn't start drink. My first drink when I was 21 years old. I'm 21 and a half, actually. So I started off well, but then halfway through my life, it got real bad. And how did it get there? Just one drink at a time.
Right.
I developed back issues. I herniated disc, my low back, L5S1, dealing with the pain. I found out that a few whiskey drinks at night was very soothing. And eventually, I found myself drinking more, not only more, earlier in the day. And I've been a freelance graphic designer since 2009, so it's been a while. And so I'm my own boss, and there's freedom and autonomy with that. And as your own boss and having no accountability, working from home, so why not start drinking before dinner? Why not start drinking at 3?
Right.
And there's lots of days where it's before lunch, and it just depends on what I had to do. Driving, kids, and the gym. You mentioned CrossFit. That's how we met, Mark. And when you came in, I thought, who's this guy coming in? And he's like, cool, calm, and collected guy named Mark. And praise of you is, man, you're just a workhorse. You never complain.
I have been through the ringer, and I think that's sort of the purpose of, what I want to accomplish with today's interview is, 25% of the population has an addiction of some sort. 25% of the population has an addiction of some sort. Some of it is well advanced and some of it's not. Almost everyone that we know has a friend, a family member, somebody that's an acquaintance of theirs that has been put through the ringer, whether it started in their childhood or whether it started in adult life. And I think, the important thing is the stigma of having a problem. So many people hide behind that stigma. I've got a problem, or I've had a divorce, or I had a rough childhood, or, this happened to me, that happened to me. But the fact is that stuff happens to everyone. Stuff happens to everyone. And the whole purpose of time-tested mastery is that the people that apply the principles that we're talking about today, their lives change and get better. And so sharing that story and letting people, hey, no, it's okay. Me too. It's okay. And there is help, there is hope, there is a way to get through it. And all the people that I'm interviewing, they all have their crosses to bear. Some are heavier than others. Some of them I share, some of them I don't share. But everyone has their own cross to bear. And, as a result of that childhood, that I came out of, I'm a survivor. And so I can withstand a tremendous amount of pain and just keep on trudging. And I think that's what you're you're saying, just a workhorse. You get hit upside the head, you just keep going. You get hit upside the head, you just keep going. So that's been my mindset. And, thank heaven and thank God for the people that have shared, time-tested principles with me, because without it, my life wouldn't be here. Okay. So I think we're getting to this point, and it seems like it's around COVID over a period of a couple of years. You're going through the addiction issues. Rachel's going through a relationship change. Describe that season in sort of the moment, that moment of clarity when you knew something needed to change. What was that like?
It was interesting at the time, and we're talking several years within this addiction, and I just turned 50, and in my whole lifetime of things, this addiction happened, and it was so powerful that 45 years of building a life was destroyed in a year. The deepest part in me was separating slowly over time without me even noticing, but I sure felt it. I almost didn't make it out of this.
So are you leading into your desert experience? Is that where you're leading into?
I mean, I could.
It sounds like I think it sounds like that's where you're going.
As I was feeling more and more hopeless, and so I got my truck and I hooked up our camper trailer. I got lost in Johnson Valley. I drove and drove, and I filled up my gas tank. And at the time, I was 15 months sober. Now, let me say this, is that just because I was sober didn't mean I was sober-minded. Loneliness is a very, very scary place for me. I don't like it. I was out there for a total of 3 days, 3 nights, and I was drinking all day. Okay, I've told this story kind of lots of times. It's part of my healing and my therapy and telling the story, but I tend to cry because it was only 3 years ago. So the wound is still healing. I went to a deep, dark place that I don't want to ever go through again. And so I'm doing everything in my power to not ever become weak like I was, to put on the full armor of God so that I could endure any sort of challenges, trials, troubles that come my way. So the last day, day 3, it wasn't my choice, but I heard a helicopter out there, and I thought, well, I haven't heard anybody for 3 days, and what's a helicopter doing out here? I was way out there in the middle of the desert, and sure enough, it was search and rescue. Search and rescue had found me. Now, like I said, I've spent a lot of my life in faith with God, in communion with God. And have I ever really heard his audible voice, or like something as tangible as that? And he whispered, and it was louder than the devil's screams. And he whispered, "I will never leave you nor forsake you. I am here, Andy." And shortly after, the search and rescue helicopter came, and they picked me up, and my actual real rock bottom was April 14th, 2022, when I held my dad during his last breath. And the next day, I woke up. And at the time, I've been living with my mom. So, that was the only way for them to release me into the arms of my 77-year-old mom. So for a month, I lived with her in Fresno, and she took care of me. She was just like the mother I knew her to be as a child. And so with her by my side, along with my brother and his family, we saw my father pass away. And he had been sick. He had a stroke, and he had been sick on decline. So it's nothing abrupt, and we knew this was coming, but it's very hard. And so the next day was my first day without a drink. And so today, on this day right now, Mark, you picked the perfect day to do this interview. And it is my 3-year birthday of sobriety, and on April 15th, a new life began for me. On that day of sobriety, I had to rely on people to tell me what to do. I couldn't think straight. That distortion is part of my reality. So I had to rely on people around me that were trustworthy and good. My mom, Rachel, was the one that believed in me at the time. While I lost everything during that time, Rachel was the one that stood by me along with my mom. So those two women were the ones to truly believe in me. And that's what I needed. And then from there, I then sought to get help with life coach. I talked to her twice a week. I lined up with a therapist, a Christian therapist. His name is George, and he helped weed out the lies and helped me understand the truth that I am a loved child of God.
And that's where the light switched for you, is what it sounds like. Congratulations. What a great anniversary today is. There is no way to be anything but grateful. For somebody that has survived the depths of darkness, there's no other emotion that you can experience on these special days, other than gratitude. The most powerful words I think that there can be between human beings is the phrase, me too, me too. And, so there was a time when I heard God's voice audibly, and there's only one time I know for sure that I heard it. And the phrase that I heard was, if I want you, I can take you. I don't need your help. That was the words that I heard. There's a lot of people, if they're not in that moment now of despair, that you're describing, and then a lot of people that suffer from addiction have experienced, the ability to hear your journey through it and how you move forward and what's on the other side, what's on the other side of it is a testament of hope for anybody that has the disease of addiction yet. So, I appreciate you sharing. Rachel also has sort of this moment, where God spoke to you. I think God spoke to you through other people. Is that how it worked out for you?
In a way, during my my side of that time period, I operate a little bit different than Andy does. Because when I see that where he says he didn't want to face reality, I'm like, let's face reality. That sounds exciting. I love accountability. I love responsibility. And it's like the first decision that I always try and make. And that's, again, without knowing God. But during that time, it comes out that he's, leaving, and he's down in the desert, and he's, for all of us up in Big Bear, we're like, he's missing. We don't know where he's at. We don't know what's going on. And the story starts eventually to unfold. I'm midway through a divorce at that time. And so my first thought was, I need to tell my ex-husband before he hears from anybody else, So I made it a point to reach out to him, like, hey, I need to talk to you. Where are you at? Because I wanted him to hear it from me, because I felt like I owed him that after, 14 years in a marriage. Like, most people would walk away and be like, let him figure it out. But I felt like I really owe it to him to let him hear it from me. So that did. And during that time, obviously I'm scared, because I'm like, where is he? Is he alive? Is he dead? Nobody knows. We're down there searching for him. It was a mess of time. And so also during that time, there's friends group going on, like me and my ex-husband's friend groups, and people at work and everything, people at the gym, so I think when you're going through a hard time, people fall on one side or the other with like, I'm going to stay and support you, or I'm out of here, you're terrible, right? And so I had a couple friends that really stepped up and showed me what true friendship was, and also like what Christianity even is. And these were all friends that were churchgoers and that were going to love me through no matter what. It's the thing that I love and hold dear about her, she was friends with both my ex-husband, she was friends with me, and she was able to give me what I needed, Andy what he needed, Matt what he needed, and Andy's ex what she needed. She was a friend to all of us, and I just thought, like, that's such a beautiful thing, because I'm not one to make you choose sides, like if you feel like I need to choose sides between me and him or them, please take them, because I know that they need it too, but But I know that there's, just, I felt like that was a beautiful thing that she offered, that she was able to just be that for everybody. And then also other friends that introduced me to different pastors that we listened to online. So then it was kind of as a door was opened. And this is before me and Andy ever decided, like, we're going to do this or we're not going to do this, I just had those different Christian friends step up and be true friends. And I think that's what opened the door for me to be open to God, because Maya used to talk to me about God when I was with my ex-husband, and I was like, all right, that's cute. Like,
So, so your journey through this storm, you had Christian friends that, at least Maya, for one, and others that are unnamed, that sort of guided you through and supported you, which is really invaluable. So, Rachel, is there a moment of surrender for you also?
A little less deep, obviously not as traumatic of an experience during that time, but just kind of realizing like life wasn't working the way that it was working. So I guess I got to a point where I just thought, I'm ready to try something new, because this current way of life is no good right now. So that's the only thing I can say, is that I was just open to change.
And so is there any particular path that you followed early on?
I would say, I've always worked on myself. I get up typically really early in the morning, reading, journaling, things like that. So like now that's going to include prayer time and reading the Bible, right? So like that was a little shift in my life once Andy pretty much stepped in and said, if we're going to be together, we're going to church. And so I was, sure, why not? Sounds fun.
Sounds fun.
But I too had a life coach that I was working with. So she was a great shoulder to lean on. And she's the one that I introduced Andy to get some help with as well.
Everybody's path to recovery is a little bit different. So, the next question, is as a couple, how does your life and your relationship work today? How has it changed with your spiritual discipleship and your partnership working together? What does it look like now?
A lot different. So after we decided, like, let's try this out and see what it looks like without the drama, we started kind of in a way dating. Andy decided we're going to church. So we found a new church to go to. Definitely changed our lives, getting our heads screwed on the right direction. And at that point, I was so new to it, but the messages that were being said, I was just like, I can't wait for the next Sunday and the next Sunday and the next Sunday. And so during the week, we would listen to different pastors online too. And for me, it was just, the mindset was so different than what I was used to. I think one thing that really stuck with me during that introduction into church was I was out showing property one day, and there was this house I was in, and beautiful lady that owned the house, seemed like she's got everything together, and right up above her bed was this quote that just said, "Give it to God and go to bed." And I was just like, that sounds real nice, like, because I've never been, I was always living a life of give it to Rachel and go to bed, and that was no fun. A lot of stress running life that way. But then just kind of exploring church, exploring different pastors, seeing which ones stuck, which ones, resonated with you. And then also he started sharing kind of like my morning routine with me too, of getting up early, having coffee, reading, journaling, reading the Bible, different daily devotionals too.
So you guys do that together in the morning now?
We can't not do it. Everywhere we go, vacations or anywhere, that sort of discipline and obedience turns into a good habit. It turns into a necessity of life.
I can definitely notice a difference on a day where I don't do it and a day when I do it. So
yeah.
And even further, if I can go on a hike, like I went on one this morning, and just get my head right and talk to God, like my day is going to be 1,000 times better than if I didn't take that 45 minutes to an hour. And it's like, why wouldn't you take that 45 minutes to an hour to do something that's like a vitamin for you every day?
Because you think a lot of us get into this mentality where, oh, that's just selfish, me time. Actually, it's for the benefit of other people around us, because when we're happy, healthy, and full of God's God's love, then we're able to then give it to other people. And that's the point. That's our goal.
I share that there is a 90-minute session that I have with myself every day, myself and God, that includes reading, study, and journaling and prayer. And I think I've missed a handful of days in the last 14 years with that. And it's the most important thing in my entire life by far. So, I want to shift into how you're helping others with it. And I know there's two things that you're doing. One is a Christian 12-step recovery group that you're leading. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I really want to talk about your book, your latest book that you guys have done.
So it was totally God that started it all. I was struggling in co-parenting with my ex-husband, and at court I had petitioned the court, like, will you please order co-parenting therapy? And so of course no court's going to say no, we're not going to do that. They were like, yes, that's what you all have to do. So it was court ordered, and the options that they give you are go down the hill, you have to drive an hour and a half to get down to go to Redlands, San Bernardino, anywhere like that. The cost was just outrageous for what it was. And I'm just like, this is not going to be successful. We need somebody else. So I'm praying about it. And then all of a sudden I'm driving down a street that I always drive in Big Bear. And there's this huge sign that says, it says co-parenting therapy. And I'm like, what? Because I thought I had looked for everywhere in Big Bear, couldn't find it anywhere. And there it is on this big sign that's always been there. And so I call, and Lisa answers the phone. I mean, the cost was so inexpensive, and just the cost of your time too. I mean, it's right there in town, and it's at a Christian church too. So we start to do therapy there. He seems like he's really respects the pastor there. It seemed like after about 10 sessions, things started to kind of take off, and we were good to go. And then at times, Andy was brought up in co-parenting therapy, and so finally Andy gets to meet the pastor, and
we hit it off. His name is Dr. Robert Grand, and he's the lead pastor at Summit Christian Fellowship on Garston, along with his wife Annalisa. And he's a genius of a man. God put it on their hearts to develop curriculum for 12-step recovery group. So here's the book, the Christian Recovery Guide, 12-step workbook. It's already at the 4th edition after a dozen years. And what this does, it provides a systematic approach to dealing with our troubles, our problems, our pain, biblically, through the 12 steps, going from admitting to surrendering to really discovering yourself, and then it just leads through the 12 steps.
So the meeting's usually Friday night, 6 o'clock, 6 to 7:30, which is a great time for a meeting like a life recovery. Like, nobody wants to do anything else on a Friday night, right?
And we have cool things, to help paint a picture. As a graphic designer, I get involved with some of the content, and I speak of the step lesson for the night, and we open it up in questions in the end. So it's an open group format where people can show
they can share, they can choose not to share.
Experience, strength, and hope. Of course, it's not mandatory, but most people do share because we know that is part of the healing process.
I think what's really important is that the time that you've set, Friday nights, anybody that really wants to change their life can choose to come to your group session on a Friday night rather than go to a ball game or go to a movie or go out for dinner. I mean, if they're really serious about changing their life, that's a really good time to do it, don't you think?
I think so. I think Friday nights is a great night. Most of us have done our work Monday through Friday, and now we get to come together and talk about these hard things that's talked about. And then we get to enjoy the weekend and maybe process some things over the weekend that we were talking about on Friday night. I don't know. There's probably a lot more to it than what I just said, but I think Friday night's a great night.
Well, that's one way to give back with what you've both been through, but you brought something out of it that is really powerful and really personal. So I want you to share your book, Transformed by Trouble, that has the journaling function and has the scripture in it. Explain sort of how you put all of that together, and give a little plug for that in your new book that you're working on now.
So I'm a very processed person. So when I told you that sign, like give it to God and go to bed, and it's like, what does that look like? I need to know the steps to get there. So I started in my journaling, like, what is my issue? But also trying to change my mindset to like, what is the good in this? What can I be grateful for in this stinky, smelly situation that I'm in right now, right? So it was just like a lot of doing that, a lot of reforming the questions, trying to reframe my brain was most of it. But what does it truly look like to give it to God? I know one visual that I have when I go hiking and talking to God is I think of things that like issues as in files, right? And so it's like, oh, well, there's that file, and then God's like, give it to me. And then I'm like, well, I'm not sure if I'm ready to give you that file yet. Or if I'm like, okay, you can have that file, and then 2 weeks later I'm like hiking and I'm trying to grab that file back from God, and I'm like, hey, give it back, and he's like, are you trying to control the situation right now, or do you really trust me to do this? So that was a little part of the motivation of the book, but also like just how can we look at the bad things in our life as great things too, and that will, I think, really transform not only your mindset but you as a person as well.
It was born from Rachel's idea as far as like, hey Andy, let's make a journal available to people about these series of questions that seem to be coming up in our lives. As adversity comes to us, how do we do this? How do we properly go about these trials and troubles that come to us? So yeah, we wanted to organize and put together a systematic approach to dealing with these things. The first question would be something along the lines, to identify the trouble, just write down the circumstance, and then we reflect our emotions. So we're open and honest with our emotions. How do we truly feel about this, and just get it all down on paper? Then we start to shift a little bit to like, how can we seek God's perspective? Like, so we want to get into this more spiritual and God-minded perspective as opposed to our own fleshly perspective where we're the victim. And then from there, and that's just the start. So from there, for question 4, we started to get into how can we pray for this, and how can we truly surrender this? Like her analogy of giving the file folder to God, like that is the act of surrender. Like, I have this baggage, I have this trouble, it's packaged up right here, and it's just so heavy, confusing, I don't know what to do. Here, God, take it. All right, cool. But then sometimes we want it back because God's taking forever on this, or not doing it right, or whatever our desires want. It's proven that we can't do this on our own strength and power and wisdom and knowledge, where we need a divine sense and vision from God. So question 5 would be then, how can we reframe the trouble? How can we begin the process of reframing the trouble from going from a victim mentality to a victor sort of outlook on life? And whether or not God fixes our circumstance or not, that would be great and all. But what this book is about is more about the transformation of our heart. Whether or not our problems are fixed or not, I don't know, that would be nice. But our ultimate goal in our relationship with God and with other people is how we are truly transformed in this trial.
It's basically like the one Bible verse that talks about be count it all joy when you experience troubles, and that to me was like, who in their right mind
Yeah.
would want to do anything like that? And then I got to thinking, like, how do you get there? And I think it's finding that, like, question number 7, finding your gratitude in every situation. Like, it's just, I can think back on every terrible situation in my life, and now on the other side of it, I'm very grateful for what it happened and how it happened. And I actually wouldn't change how those hard situations went. So if you can be on that side of it and know that everything in your past was great and you can count it all joy, like why can't you do it while you're in the crux of it and you're in the worst part of your life? You should be able to execute that part too.
So tell me if this is the right way to express it. So, Rachel, you took Paul's scripture where he says, find joy in everything that nobody else wants to do. But as a believer in studying the word, you said, well, how do you do that? And you developed a tool to help people accomplish exactly that. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah,
They need to get the book. So share with everybody where they can find it and how they can get a copy.
all right, it's called Transformed by Trouble. It's like what we said, it's a question guided journal with 8 questions, and there's resources here in the back giving you, where's it at? Verses, specific verses, yeah.
Based off what you're dealing with.
Yeah. So you can get it on Amazon. Just search Transformed by Trouble and remember this cover. And the cover artwork, let me hit on that because everyone's like, what is that? So this is called kintsugi, and it's a Japanese art form of broken pottery. So when a bowl like this breaks, they don't throw it away. It's not to be discarded. It's meant to be put back together. And when it's put back together, the healer, God, will put us back together even stronger using gold in the resin. And so what this reminds me of is like scars on us. It could be a physical scars on our bodies or scars in our heart, to where the scars don't define us. The damage doesn't define us. It's a reminder that we're stronger and more resilient than before, making us more unique. This bowl is really unique. And it's also not perfect. There's still a crack here. And so we're constantly in the process of being refined as we go through these troubles in life.
That's awesome. So just to finish up, you have an upcoming book coming called Divorce to Deliverance that you're in the process. I know that many people go through that experience, and I know that if you don't heal from it and you don't grow through it, that you might be bound to repeat the same mistake the next time, and so we want to avoid that. So tell us a little bit about what we can expect from your next project.
So that was born on a cruise ship. We were out on a cruise and I got to thinking about, like, we do this 12-step program and the concept of it is amazing. January is month 1, step 1, and then so on and so on and so on. So, like, if you can do that with life recovery, how come you can't do that with, like, divorce or, trauma or addiction, right? So then, the first topic that I naturally lean to is the hardest thing that I went through in my life, which was divorce. So just kind of told Andy, like, I think when we first wrote the book, I was like, hey, we're going to write a book. And he's like, no, we're not, and then 3 months later, like, it's done.
It's like, yeah.
Because, once he gets excited about something, he's
I'm all in. Yeah. I was all in on this. Like, yeah.
So that one, we started just, going through every one of the steps and leaning it towards divorce. And there's going to be a question every day on reflecting throughout your divorce and just growing through it. So, and then we figured as soon as we write that one, then we can write another one about addiction and one about trauma and one about codependency. So it's just a great format.
Yeah, the 12 steps have really changed my life. I've gone to church my whole life, and I've been proud of myself for most of my life until I wasn't. So many people are going through a divorce nowadays, as we know. Well, how do we do it? When we're overwhelmed with emotion, we're just reacting, most of us. We're just reacting to just instantly fix our pain with however that is, whatever coping mechanism.
And usually it's pointing your finger at somebody else, like that's everybody's go-to move is, I'm going through a divorce, so it's my ex-partner's problem, like they're the fault of everything. And it kind of helps you back up and see, like, where were you responsible for? Yes. Where were you need to be accountable for? So all those fun things.
Fun things. So we're in the middle of writing it. In fact, we don't even know if Divorce to Deliverance is the actual final.
Okay.
But that's where we're at. I'm halfway through, but it's 365 days of unique content, starting off with the the title, a verse to go with it, one paragraph, and 2/3 of it is about journaling. So it's getting truth and wisdom and inspiration, the top half. Then the bottom half is then your own self-reflection. And there's a specific question that relates to the topic that relates to the step for the month. Now, you don't have to start it in January. You can come in and out. Hopefully you're in all the time, but we know life gets busy. And
Very good. Well, I think I've gone through all of the things that I wanted to ask you about. I want to thank you for sharing a piece of your heart, a piece of your experience. It's very, very motivational to see people that have gone through a rough journey that have succeeded and come through the other side. So I want to commend you for sharing that with others, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. Thank you for giving us the platform and the opportunity to speak to somebody in your audience. So there's a miracle on the other side. We just can't see it, but just know that God is right there with you, along with your brothers and sisters who love you.